Hello, I'm Leo Woodman, and I'm here to introduce you to my class, A Study of the Revelation. We'll go over who I am and the syllabus and a few other things in this introduction today. Like I said, I'm Leo Woodman. I'm a full-time minister in Sterling, Illinois. I'm call myself a teaching minister. I'm also a pastoral counselor, and I am the ministry lead for Celebrate Recovery here with our congregation. And I'm also an independent New Testament scholar. And I have been wanting to share this class for some time, and so here we are, finally getting it off the ground. I'm glad you decided to join me in this study. Let's go over the syllabus and how this is going to go. There's two textbooks you should have for this study. Everything I'm going to present will be coming out of the English Standard Version of the Bible. So I'll be using my English Standard Version New Testament. And also, you're going to want to pick up a copy of my workbook, The Study of Revelation. Both of these things, both the English Standard New Testament and a study of the Revolution, a workbook by Leo Woodman, all available at Amazon if you want to get them there. So we're going to be looking at several different things as we go through our study. What I want you to understand about the syllabus is it's going to be broken up into three parts. There's the first part, I'm going to do the introduction, and I'll do lesson one in a bit as well. Then after that, there's going to be a pop quiz on what I've said about how this study is going to go and why. And then we will do lessons 2 through 10, and that will contain Revelation chapters 1 through 11 in that time period. Then we'll do a midterm exam, if you will, just to see if you're remembering the things you've learned and so on. It's an open book test, by the way, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's not like I'm going to hand out actual grades. What I'll do is I'll make a certificate of completion available to you when you finish the course, when it's all completed. And then the second half of the course will be lessons 11 through 21, where we cover Revelation chapter 12 through 22. And there will be a final exam there as well. Again, open book. I'm not going to grade them. It's something to go through and look back and see what you've learned, what questions you might have concerning what you've learned, as well as just giving you an idea of what you've covered in this class. And then we'll have a concluding class as well, the conclusion of it all as we've studied it out and looked at it together. This book of Revelation is a very interesting book, and I've enjoyed studying it many times and teaching it several times. So let's go ahead and I'll read some stuff to you from the workbook. The introduction in the workbook goes this way. Context, context, context. Anyone who knows me or has heard me teach knows my mantra. Context, context, context. I repeat it frequently. I firmly believe that if we do not understand the context of what we are reading or studying, we are subject to wild interpretation of the text. And I firmly believe this. Like I said, anybody who knows me or heard me teach or preach, it's all about context. When we consider the Bible, context is paramount, especially for those of the modern Western mindset, which would be those of us in Europe and America. Our current context is far removed from the Old and New Testaments. We are far removed by time, geography, culture, and language. So these affect how we read the Bible and how we interpret the scriptures. Regarding Revelation in particular, we struggle to understand and appreciate the context of the writing. It is the most misunderstood and misinterpreted book of the Bible, as far as I'm concerned. The fact that there are at least four common interpretations of the text should help us to understand that it's not understood very well. That being said, through this study, we may come to a clearer understanding and the purpose of the revelation. First, we will consider the authorship of the text, the period in which it was written, the cultural context of that period, what the church was experiencing, and the canonicity of the letter itself, the revelation, before looking into the most common interpretations of the text. Second, we will examine those interpretations individually, the strengths and weaknesses of each of them. We will also investigate the bias behind those interpretations, because we all come to study the word with our particular bias, whether it's from our denomination or our personal biases, whatever it may be. We approach it with a particular bias. We will then move on to the study of the mystical prophecy that is Revelation in context the best we can. This little book is very influential in today's Christian culture. This influence has many positive and negative effects on outsiders' perception of the church. Revelation is considered to be the blueprint of eschatology. As such, many consider it the literal way all things surrounding end times unfold before our eyes. In reality, this is a problematic view. The problem is that this view of the book has been around long enough that the times are continuously being reinterpreted as history unfolds. Every new world event, war, natural disaster, is pointed out as these are absolutely the last days, which of course has not been true thus far. The world continues as it always has. The world looks at the continuous sky is following preaching as foolishness. Foolishness because they see unfulfilled prophecy. No doomsday prophet claims they know the day and the hour when the end is coming is ever right. And therefore, the skeptics believe they are justified in not believing. But like any other tool, it must be used for the purpose for which it was created. Speaking of the revelation, improper use of a device can be harmful to the user as well as those surrounding them. May we use revelation as intended and not force other purposes on it. And that is my goal of this study, is to see it for what it is, not impose anything on the revelation, but look at it for the first time from possibly a very new perspective for some of us. So the Revelation, it was written about 95 AD. In the authorship of the Revelation, there's two possibilities that scholars put forth. It's possibly the Apostle John, who was the youngest of all the apostles and was very close with Jesus himself. Or there are those who believe it's possible that it was a prophet by the name of John of Patmos. So authorship is up for debate amongst scholars and has been for a long time in all reality. The context of the revelation is it's occurring during Roman persecution of the church. For around 35 years at the end of the first century, the church was persecuted relentlessly, and it was initiated by Emperor Nero. We all remember Nero fiddled as Rome burned. Well, he blamed that on the Christians, and that's when the persecution really kicked up, and it became problematic for Christians just to exist. So that's when it began, but the persecution even got worse under Emperor Domitian, who was very cruel to the Christians and made things very difficult for many people. The reality about the canonicity of the book of Revelation, or the letter of Revelation, is it wasn't added to the canon of New Testament scripture until the 4th century. It was not added until that point. It existed, and it was first listed in 383 AD by the Council of Rome. So it took a long time for the revelation, even though it was written at the end of the 1st century, it was almost the end of the 4th century before it was considered canonical, that it was going to be part of the New Testament scriptures. So a long time went by with a lot of debate and discussion as to whether or not it was even worthy to be deemed scripture. So a lot of people don't understand that, and I wanted to share that right up front so that you understand that the book of Revelation was not always what we think it has been. That's just the reality. Now, during the Reformation period, with Martin Luther and such preachers speaking out against the Catholic Church and going in a different direction, Luther himself said of the Revelation that it was neither apostolic writing nor prophetic writing. He dismissed it. He didn't believe it was written by one of the apostles. He didn't believe it to be truly prophetic. So he had no use for it. And to this day, the Eastern Orthodox Church does not allow its use in worship. It's in their Bible, but when they gather for worship, they do not refer to the book of Revelation. In other words, it would not be presented in a sermon in an Eastern Orthodox church. One of the wonderful things about Revelation is that there are approximately 300 Greek manuscripts of the Revelation itself, which is pretty impressive that we have that many manuscripts of this one book that we find at the end of our Bible. So I want to share these things with you so you get a better grasp on the Revelation itself, when it was written, how it's been handled, and so on. We'll cover this more in the actual study as well. So I mentioned earlier that there was maybe 4 interpretations, but really there's 5 interpretations that are used and maybe mixed together in their use of trying to interpret the Revelation, because this is a tough book for those of us of a Western mindset. We just don't understand this type of apocalyptic writing. So let's look at the different interpretations. I'll give you a brief explanation of what they are. There's the futurist interpretation of Revelation, and it says that the book describes events immediately preceding the second coming of Christ. And there's a lot of people who look at the Revelation in this context, that it's futurist. Interpretation is the way to go, that everything that's in Revelation will occur immediately before the second coming of Christ. And this is why you hear people saying so much and so often that this must be the last days. Jesus must be coming soon, because we're seeing Revelation unfold before our very eyes in the culture in which we live today. So that's the futurist view or interpretation of the Revelation. Then there's the continuous historical view or interpretation, and that is that the book foretells from John's writing until the end of time. In other words, everything that's in the Revelation is a continuous unfolding throughout history from the time of John writing it until Jesus comes again. So people believe this is a continual historical thing, that different events throughout history until the coming of Christ is what the Revelation is about. Now there's the philosophy of history when it comes to Revelation, and this way of interpreting the scripture as well. And it's about the symbolism. The symbolism represents forces rather than actual events and people. In other words, you're looking at it from history, and you're looking at it with a philosophical eye, if you will, that all the symbolism that we see, or this apocalyptic language in the Revelation, represents forces at work in the world and in the heavenly realms, and not actual events and actual people. Because the reality is as we look at the Revelation, from the time it was added to Scripture going forward, every generation has believed that they are the last generation, and that all these things are happening with actual events and people in their day, whether it be 500 AD or 2025. We all, generation after generation, have believed, because of the world events and characters on the world stage, that it's referring to the end of time in our time. Every generation that has studied this book has felt that way, and ours is no different. So that's the philosophy of history view or interpretation. Then there's the preterist view, and that is that the book was written and fulfilled in John's day, that it has no application to us today, that it's all been settled, it's all done. We don't need to worry about what's in the Revelation. So that's the preterist view. And there are people who will mix and match these views as they interpret the Scripture. Our last one, our fifth way of interpreting, is historical background. This book was written for people in John's days with principles applicable till the end of time. So that's the historical background way of interpreting the Scriptures, Revelation in particular. Sorry. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Revelation in context. As I shared earlier, it's all about context. We're going to see who the Revelation was written to, when it was written, why it was written, and how it is applicable to the people at that time, and how is it applicable to us today. So our study will be contextual, and this is unique. I haven't heard anybody do this before. This is something that as I was reading through the Revelation, I think this is a good way to really look at what this is all about. What is the Revelation all about? How does it affect us today? How has it affected mankind and the church for 2 millennia? I mean, think about it. This book has had a profound impact, and it has been studied in many ways by many people. And so, probably in some respects, I'm muddying the waters a little bit more by this contextual study of it. But context is everything. You have to understand the context of things to really understand the purpose. And when it comes to biblical writing, we can do that with every book of the Bible. Just look at the context of who it's written to, when it's written, and why. And God is always reaching out to his people through his word. So the Revelation, as we as human beings have put the New Testament together and the Bible completely, Revelation falls at the end of the book. And chronologically, last one written falls in at the end of the line of the New Testament. And of course, one of the things that people do with Revelation is at the end of Revelation, it says, anyone do not add to or take away from this prophecy or this book. And the thing with that is people interpret that because it's the last of the New Testament, the end of the Bible. It's right by that back cover. If it says don't add to or take away from this, it's talking about the entire Bible, Genesis to Revelation. And that is not the case. It is simply talking about the Revelation itself. It is not talking about the entirety of Scripture. It's just not the case. but it has been used that way many, many times. People will quote from the Revelation and say, oh, don't add to or take away from the Bible at all. It's not talking about the whole Bible, it's talking about the Revelation. And again, it took several hundred years before the powers that be, the scholars and bishops and so on, decided, yes, we will add it to the canon of the New Testament. So there's the context right there. We have to be careful how we interpret that. So there's your introduction. I'm looking forward to lesson 1, and we'll be talking about the revelation as a mystical revelation and a prophecy. That's the reality of the revelation. It is mystical and it is prophetic. And that's going to be our first lesson, looking at it in that context to get a better understanding of the revelation. Well, thank you for joining me in this introduction. God bless you in your studies. We'll be together again soon.